The waveform modulator will be overloaded without the regeneration limiter in the first stage circuit.
Interesting. However, theoretically...
Data.
Yes, sir.
Hello everyone, Jay Warden here, and welcome to my recap and review of the episode Unnatural Selection. Another distinctly average episode in which characters grow old rapidly but are easily cured by magical means at the end. Don't forget those spoilers, otherwise, enjoy. As Picard asks Troy for an evaluation on Pulaski's performance as Chief Medical Officer, the Enterprise receives a distress call from the USS Lantry. Picard tries to contact them, but other than a quick garbled transmission, receives no further answer, so Picard sets an intercept course. Upon arrival, the ship is still moving, undamaged and fully operational, but with no signs of life. After taking remote control of the ship and shutting her engines down, they turn on the view screen and find a bunch of old men manning the consoles. Pulaski confirms from scans they died from natural causes related to old age. In the conference room, they play back the last captain's log, who explains that he had to watch his friends and crew grow old and die as they tried to reach the nearest Federation outpost. Riker comments how the captain was only his age, perplexing the crew as to how they died so quickly of old age, noting how everyone was in perfect health bar the first officer, who had a slight bout of the flu. The crew traced their last port of call to a genetic research colony called Darwin Station. After setting up a quarantine warning on the Lantry, they head off to Darwin to see if they can get to the bottom of what's happened. Once in orbit, Picard gives them a call to find a Dr. Kingsley, who's apparently just declared a medical emergency. It seems that, much like the Lantry, her team of scientists are also starting to rapidly grow old and desperately need some help in finding the cause, though Kingsley thinks the Lantry was responsible in bringing this disease. She first wants them to take their children into quarantine first to protect them, but Pulaski and Picard refuse to bring them on board at this stage for fear of infecting the ship. In another conference session, Pulaski recommends bringing one of these children aboard in a force field to be sure they're not the ones carrying the disease, but Troy recommends caution as she believes that Kingsley isn't telling them the whole truth here. Picard weighs up the risks, having seen firsthand how bad this disease can get, and tells Pulaski to proceed with her plan cautiously. With preparations in sickbay made, they beam up a 12-year-old boy for inspection, except this 12-year-old looks like a fully grown man, and a telepathic one at that. Further tests shows he's in better health than everyone else and has an immune system so advanced Pulaski doubts he could ever get ill at all, so asks Picard to remove him from stasis to do further tests. Picard though won't risk the ship, and the two briefly argue on the matter. But Picard is the captain though, and demands Pulaski prove beyond doubt that the man-child poses no risk to the crew before proceeding further. Pulaski informs Kingsley of the decision, but Kingsley begs Pulaski to do something to save the children before the rest of them die, so Pulaski has a quick chat with LaForge, who suggests using a shuttle to examine the child out of stasis without risking the rest of the ship. After getting approval from Picard, Pulaski takes Data along for the ride, beams the man-child aboard, frees him from stasis, and begins her test despite the possible risks to herself. But despite her being sure that the children are not the cause of the disease, after about 20 minutes Pulaski starts experiencing symptoms and quickly gets Picard to beam the man-child back down to the station. With our third conference of the episode, Picard and crew debate the best way to try and help Pulaski and the research scientists, and O'Brien comes up with a transporter technobabble solution that might save the day using previous transporter data. The problem is Pulaski has never used the Enterprise's transporters, meaning there's no such data available, so Picard contacts her previous assignment to see if they have something they can use, but unfortunately has no joy. Down on Darwin Station, Pulaski thinks it's time she and Kingsley had a proper talk about these children of hers, so Kingsley shows them the extent of their research, showing that these children of theirs have not only telepathic abilities, but telekinetic skills, along with their super amazing immune systems and high intelligence. Basically super advanced genetically engineered humans. Pulaski questions her further on their immune systems though, which are so good they don't even wait for a virus to enter the body, but actively seek out and attack any pathogens. After some quick research by Data, he finds that because of this unique ability and their recent exposure to the flu, it also had the unfortunate side effect in that it starts altering regular human DNA, thus causing the old age disease, and is also incurable. Pulaski, already looking much older, which seems to shock the helmsman, informs the ship of the situation. Picard though isn't willing to give up just yet, and in an inspired idea of utter technobabble bullshit, suggests using some other DNA for Pulaski they have somewhere they can use so the transporter can compare it to her current DNA, filter out the genetic alterations caused by the disease, and restore her back to her normal age and appearance, and after some searching, they find a strand of hair with some live cells. Pulaski, now extremely old, is informed of the plan and agrees, and with everyone ready, Picard personally takes control in case something goes wrong, and has to consign Pulaski to her death. But of course, everything goes well, and Pulaski is fixed back to normal much to her joy and relief. With a cure found, everyone else who's infected is restored to their normal age off-screen, and the ship heads back to the Lantry. After paying their respects to its dead crew, the Lantry is destroyed to prevent anyone else from becoming infected. So this is an episode very reminiscent of the TOS episode The Deadly Years, where Kirk and company started to age rapidly and had to don some dubious old age makeup which is solved at the last minute. This is another distinctly average entry which is starting to be pretty much the trend for Season 2 so far, which, while a distinct improvement over Season 1's first few episodes, is not doing it any real favours either. That said, there are some good character moments here, particularly between Picard and Pulaski, which shows their strong-willed personalities clashing with each other. I like that Pulaski doesn't take shit and stands up to Picard, easily being a match for him in presence. Picard in turn, despite being constantly interrupted, calling her out on this early on, is still patient, diplomatic, and does listen to her advice while maintaining final authority over what happens on his ship. I do enjoy this dynamic more than I did between Picard and Dr. Crusher in Season 1, which instead of being mildly antagonistic, was more skewed towards a potential forced romance between the two. There is also a couple of mirrored scenes with both Pulaski and Picard talking to Troy, asking her opinion on the other, and their mutual frustration at dealing with each other, and I like how Troy basically points out that the two of them are actually pretty similar to each other. There's also this little tidbit as Picard contacts Pulaski's old captain, who says she specifically requested the Enterprise because she was a huge admirer of Picard, much to his bemusement. Pulaski even seems to be warming up a bit to Data now, even complimenting him at the end, as the two are once again paired together for some scenes. However, the rest of the episode is a little on the dry side as we go through the motions in trying to find out what causes rapid aging to happen, and the end solution is a classic case of bullshit technobabble arbitrarily solving the plot, something which becomes an infamous trope throughout Star Trek, particularly on Voyager. As far as TNG goes, this is probably the worst example of technobabble to date so far, and though I get the basic principles, use old DNA with transporter to filter out bad DNA to restore good DNA, it's still magical bullshit. I'm never a big fan of the rapid aging block device either, because I can just never buy that you can restore someone to their previous state without ill effects, considering how detrimental an effect that would have on one's body. At least the transporter in this case, you can kind of buy the magic here if you don't think about it too much, considering what the transporter can actually do to you. But the rapid aging plot device is used again in the Season 6 episode Man of the People, and the solution there literally sees Troy de-age back to her normal self within seconds, with no ill effects afterwards. I hate that. Incidentally, this is also the first time that Pulaski's loathing of the transporter is mentioned, once again paralleling her McCoy-like character traits. This episode was particularly difficult for Diana Muldaur on 2 counts. First, she absolutely hated the prosthetic old age makeup job she had to endure, along with guest star Patricia Smith, who played Dr. Kinsley. Both actresses swore they would never work again in science fiction after that, and I've heard from several actors who've had to wear makeup all the time, such as Rene Auberjonois or Bill Mumy, just how uncomfortable wearing all that crap can be. Second, Muldaur apparently had difficulties remembering her lines for this episode, and so was reading off cue cards in some instances. I think you can clearly see this when she's giving her final log entry on the view screen. You can just see her eyes scanning as if she's reading off something in the background. There's also a glaring continuity issue in this particular episode, and that's to do with the genetic engineering of humans. Now, to be fair to the episode, this was produced before this became a particular story point, but later episodes of Star Trek firmly established that such genetic engineering is pretty much blanket banned throughout the Federation, and that this precedent went back as far as the eugenics wars which produced the likes of Khan, and its overall tendency to produce troubled or unstable individuals, notably shown in DS9's Season 6 episode, Statistical Improbabilities. This is a recurring story theme in DS9 because, spoiler alerts ahead, of how Dr. Bashir is revealed to be genetically engineered himself in Season 5, though of course he turned out to be one of the good ones. Enterprise also addressed this issue in the 3-parter Augment story. In any case, the Federation is notoriously strict against any kind of genetic manipulation beyond curing medical conditions, and is quite prepared to send you to prison for it, as most times it simply causes more trouble than it's worth. So we'll just have to accept that this episode is essentially a retcon, considering no one even bats an eyelid at the work that Kingsley and her scientists have been doing here. As far as the actual subject matter itself, I can see that the episode is trying to warn us of the dangers of trying to tamper with our own genetic code, given we simply don't know what the long-term consequences of it will be, something still quite relevant in today's world. Most of the time, Trek manifests this as individuals with magnified egos and superiority complexes like Khan or Malik who go on evil rampages, but in this case, and I think the only case, It's actually a biological threat, as these humans are so advanced that their immune systems end up killing normal humans. There isn't too much moralizing or preaching here, merely the characters sadly noting that these extremely gifted humans will have to spend their entire lives in isolation because of the threat they pose. There's only one other thing to talk about here, and that's Chief O'Brien. Although he's popped up half a dozen times so far, this is the first time the show actually gave him the name of O'Brien, and it's the first episode where he gets significant screen time and multiple lines of dialogue. Though there's little actual characterization of him here yet, there's this nice little moment between him and Picard as we're told if they can't fix Pulaski's condition there and then, they'll have to essentially scatter her molecules into space, therefore killing her. Much to O'Brien's relief, Picard takes over that duty for him, and I like that Picard took direct responsibility for such an action. O'Brien is a favourite of mine, and I really like Colm Meaney as an actor, and I always think it's interesting how mainstream a character he became after essentially being nothing but a background actor for such a long time. O'Brien is also famous for the wildly inconsistent ranks he holds throughout his existence, with it only finally being firmly established and shown in the last 4 seasons of DS9, showing a unique rank insignia for enlisted personnel. I guess we should also give an honorary mention to the Miranda-class ship that appears in this episode as the USS Lantry, its first appearance for TNG, and much like the Excelsior class, frequently pops up in large numbers despite being an 80-plus-year-old design at this stage. Obviously, the real reason for this was it's much cheaper to reuse old studio models than design new expensive ones to film. Miranda-class ships are jokingly referred to as the red shirts of starships in Starfleet, as they are often depicted getting blown up real good in 1 or 2 hits. So, although there's some interesting trivia to this episode, overall it's another distinctly average one with a handful of decent character moments. However, I'm pretty sure that the next 2 episodes are going to be far more entertaining and interesting, with our next entry being A Matter of Honor, as Riker goes headfirst into the deep end of Klingon culture by serving on a Klingon bird of prey. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did then please do check out my other reviews as well, and also if you haven't yet then please do like, subscribe and share. Until next time, this is Jay Warden, signing off.